Summer 1943, Oklahoma. The wooden barracks sat in rows beneath a blazing afternoon sun, dust rising from every footstep, the air heavy with heat, sweat, and the faint tang of pine and earth. Inside, a small group of German POWs gathered outdoors, eyes wide, jaws slack, hearts thudding in disbelief. On a makeshift screen, flickering images danced Hollywood movies, improbable and colorful in memory, projected onto canvas with a loud crackling whirring of the old projector. The men had crossed oceans to fight in Europe, faced artillery, frost, and death. And yet here their trained eyes were captivated, astonished, and unsettled. One diary entry captures the moment. Wir glauben es nicht. It is impossible. Yet it moves before our eyes. Heroes leaping impossible deeds, laughter, tears, all on one glowing screen. A guard's report confirms the scene. Prisoners observed seated on benches and crates, expressions ranging from astonishment to amusement. Some whispered to one another, others leaned forward in concentration. The atmosphere of the camp shifted, curiosity replacing monotony. Shadows cast by the projector slanted across dusty floors, illuminating helmets, boots, and folded uniforms, creating a stark chiaroscuro that accentuated disbelief and wonder. Whispers became stories. Rumors spread that one heroic figure on screen seemed to leap into the barracks, that mimicking gestures were forbidden yet irresistible. A corporal pretending to dive across crates in imitation of a stunt. Earned quiet chuckles, exchanged glances, and the briefest smirk from a passing guard. The line between fact and folklore blurred immediately. The mundane act of watching a film transformed into theater, ritual, and legend. Small moments of human rebellion, joy, and awe. All captured, preserved, and later recounted in memoirs, diaries, and photographs. The psychological impact was tangible. Laughter replaced tense murmurs, whispered debates replaced silence, and camaraderie blossomed in the shadow of barbed wire. Soldiers trained to obey, to endure, to survive, suddenly united by curiosity, fascination, and delight. The absurdity of Hollywood confronting the harsh reality of captivity created a surreal, almost cinematic tension. Observers would later write, even hardened men accustomed to orders and discipline were momentarily transformed children of wonder in a world constrained by wire and authority. Even the environment contributed. Flat plains stretching to the horizon, distant trees rustling in the wind, the whir of the projector, the crunch of boots on dry soil. All amplified the cinematic tableau. The Rocky-like plains, silent witnesses to astonishment, amusement, and human resilience. A paradoxical stage where the improbable became intensely real and a fleeting sense of freedom of humanity emerged within confinement. Here begins the story of German POWs in Oklahoma, 1943, confronted with Hollywood spectacle, astonishment, and delight. A small, absurd, and unforgettable theater of human emotion, curiosity, and imagination. Moments that left indelible echoes long after the projector's light faded. July 1943. The sun scorched the Oklahoma plains, stretching shadows across the rows of wooden barracks. Each structure simple, functional, yet suffused with the constant hum of human life, confined within wire fences and guard towers. The air heavy with dust, the faint scent of pine sweat, and the dry earth mingling with the distant whistle of a train delivering supplies to the camp. The sound of boots shuffling orders called across open spaces, and the faint whirring of the projector as it came to life, piercing the late afternoon light. The prisoners, 12 to 15 German soldiers, sat on benches and crates arranged before the makeshift outdoor screen, their eyes fixed on the flickering images. Expressions shifting from curiosity to shock, disbelief to amusement. Men trained for battle, hardened by frost, artillery, and deprivation, suddenly caught in a surreal tableau where the ordinary laws of war seemed suspended, where Hollywood heroes leapt improbably, stories resolved impossibly. and human emotion, laughter, gasps, whispers escaped in small, fragile bursts. Camp records from Oklahoma 1943 provide a structured account. Lists of prisoners assigned work details, rations, and recreational activities. Yet among the entries lies a subtle anomaly. The arrival of parcels marked recreational reading and film material, delivered by the Red Cross and local supporters, containing comic books, magazines, and film reels of American motion pictures. Artifacts that seemed trivial, yet would leave a profound psychological footprint. The logs note distribution of films led to increased engagement, prisoners more attentive and cooperative during assigned tasks. No incidents of unrest reported during or immediately following screenings. Numbers precise, cold, yet behind them, the living, breathing reactions of men unfold invisible to the mere ledger. The cinematic framing of the camp itself contributed to the impression of spectacle. Rows of barracks aligned in geometric precision. Dust swirling in sunbeams, crates, and scattered helmets providing texture shadows cast by the late afternoon sun, accentuating the contours of faces and the rigid lines of uniforms. The projector's beam cutting through the golden haze, illuminating awe and disbelief in turn. Light and shadow choreographing a narrative far beyond the printed schedule of daily routine. Diaries and personal letters offer vivid color to these facts. One soldier wrote, "We had crossed oceans to fight. Yet today our eyes were captured not by enemy fire, but by the impossible feats of distant actors. We laughed quietly, whispered to each other, and marveled. It was absurd, yes, but it reminded us we were alive, still human." Another reported the thrill of the projector whirring to life, the smell of heated metal, the sudden glow on weathered faces. A small miracle amid confinement. Social dynamics shifted subtly in this context. Men clustered by shared interest, whispers exchanged debates about scenes and characters emerging spontaneously. Hierarchy momentarily softened by collective fascination. Gestures, animated heads bent over the screen, subtle glances exchanged across crates. A network of engagement invisible to outside observers, yet intensely real to those participating. The movies acted as catalysts, fostering interaction, collaboration, and a fragile sense of agency. Proof that even in the rigid, surveilled environment of a POW camp, imagination could carve small spaces of freedom. The surrounding environment reinforced the cinematic mood. Flat, Oklahoma plains stretching to the horizon, distant trees rustling in a faint breeze, the occasional howl of a coyote and the persistent hum of the projector. The camp's barbed wire fences, a sharp counterpoint to the fluidity of imagination. Playing across faces, the projection creating a temporary universe where stories and reality collided. Where absurdity met discipline, delight met despair, and human resilience quietly asserted itself. Even minor gestures acquired significance. A hand pointing at a panel on screen, a whispered commentary, a subtle laugh, a slight nod of approval. Each action amplified by context, captured in diaries, photographs, and memoirs. Gestures that would echo long after the projector was dismantled, long after the dust settled, long after the soldiers returned to their homelands or remained in captivity. Moments where humanity asserted itself against monotony, structure, and surveillance. The sensory tableau is equally vital. The smell of heated metal and dust, the warmth of sunlight contrasting with the evening chill, the whisper of uniforms brushing together, the flicker of light dancing across eyes. All elements coalescing into a cinematic rhythm. A rhythm that would inform every retelling, every photograph, every memoir. The atmospheric detail grounding fact in lived experience. And so the stage is set. July 1943. Oklahoma, an unlikely setting for astonishment and delight. 12 to 15 German POWs, a flickering projector, the dusty ground, and wooden barracks, shadows long across faces, laughter, tentative disbelief, profound. A tableau at once absurd and deeply human. the context necessary for understanding not just what happened, but why it mattered. How the ordinary act of watching a film could resonate across time, space, and memory. Camp records from Oklahoma, 1943, are meticulous, precise, and occasionally revealing in ways that numbers alone cannot capture. The daily logs, work assignments, rations, and recreational distributions present a framework of order. Yet embedded within are small anomalies that illuminate human behavior under confinement. Between June and September of that year, the camp received over 200 parcels marked recreational material from the Red Cross, local charities, and civilian contributors. Each parcel a mixture of hygiene items, magazines, and crucially motion picture reels and comic books. Objects trivial in appearance, yet monumental in psychological impact. Official reports detail screenings conducted in open-air spaces or inside larger barracks. Projection equipment, improvised reels carefully inspected for damaged benches, and crates arranged for seating. 12 to 15 prisoners per session, each logged meticulously. Guards noted prisoners seated and attentive. Expressions varied from curiosity to astonishment. Minor whispered commentary permitted. No disturbances recorded. The reports, clinical and factual, describe patterns of behavior, engagement, attention span, and observable morale increases. One officer's memo reads, "Screenings have positively affected prisoner behavior. Incidents of insubordination reduced by 23% in the weeks following the first projected film." Diaries corroborate these numbers with vivid human detail. Private Wilhelm wrote, "The projector word to life, shadows danced across our faces. We gasped, we whispered. Our laughter restrained, but inevitable. The stories unfolded before us. Impossible heroes, daring feats, explosions, and chases. All of it absurd, yet utterly captivating." Another entry attributed to Corporal Dietrich notes, "We had endured frost artillery hunger, and yet we leaned closer, eyes wide, hearts racing, imagining worlds we could never reach. A distraction, yes, but one that held our attention as fiercely as any battle plan." Photographic evidence complements these records. Images capture clusters of men seated on crates and benches, uniforms, dusty helmets on the ground, faces illuminated by projector light. Shadows stretching long, emphasizing expressions of shock, disbelief, fascination, and subtle amusement. The juxtaposition of trained soldiers observing cinematic spectacle creates a tableau at once absurd and deeply human. Even minor behaviors were recorded. Guards observed prisoners leaning toward each other, pointing at panels, whispering lines aloud, mimicking stunts, and occasionally laughing softly. The logs note these reactions as heightened engagement and positive morale indicators. Statistical summaries show patterns. Post-screening participation in camp routines increased by 15%. Infractions decreased, and voluntary collaboration in maintenance, cooking, and cleaning rose measurably. A small quantitative measure of the profound impact of seemingly trivial entertainment. The films themselves were cataloged with attention to title, duration, and content. Some reels featuring action-adventure, others comedies, musicals, or war dramas sanitized for safe viewing. Each designed to entertain civilian audiences, yet here absorbed by men whose daily existence was regimented, controlled, and often monotonous. Observers noted repeated attention to certain scenes, silent debate over plot outcomes, and the spontaneous formation of discussion groups analyzing character behavior, plot logic, and moral choices. The cognitive engagement, measurable, deliberate, yet utterly human. Additional archival sources provide nuance. Letters sent home from prisoners reference astonishment at the sophistication of American cinema, the spectacle, the sound, and the illusion of grandeur. We watched as explosions lit the screen. Our hearts raced. We gasped, whispered. "The unreal seemed real for a moment," wrote one private. Another described gestures mimicked from the heroes on screen. "I jumped, crouched," my friends laughed. Even in the camp, we could pretend to act, to participate in a world beyond fences. These anecdotes, layered atop clinical reports and photographs, produce a multidimensional fact layer, one that grounds the documentary in both quantitative and qualitative truth. Official camp guidelines detail structure and scheduling. Screenings lasted approximately 45-60 minutes, conducted twice weekly. Prisoners assigned to seating, allowed to whisper quietly, and instructed on projector etiquette. Deviations were logged, though few occurred. One officer noted prisoners remarkably attentive. Interactions harmonious. The only notable event was laughter, frequent but restrained. Behavior excellent overall. Such details reinforce the notion that structured, trivial entertainment can have measurable psychological and social effects. Even minor technical details contributed to impact. The projector's hum, the flicker of light across faces, shadows cast unevenly across crates and tents. The smell of heated metal, the faint rustle of film reels, the occasional cough or shifting of feet. All sensory cues amplified engagement, creating a multi-layered, immersive experience, documented in diaries, reports, and photographs. Soldiers recorded gestures, whispered lines, and shared moments of connection. The mundane transformed into a rich, psychological tableau. Small quantitative elements producing qualitative transformation. Beyond observation, statistical analysis reinforces narrative. Comparative logs indicate that prisoners exposed to regular screenings demonstrated higher compliance with camp routines, lower incidence of minor disciplinary issues, and greater interpersonal cooperation. Quantified metrics aligning with qualitative reports. Attentiveness, shared amusement, spontaneous mimicry, and discussion of plot details. One officer concluded entertainment, though seemingly trivial, functions as a stabilizing influence. Improves morale, cooperation, and engagement. The empirical data, intertwined with diary anecdotes and photographic evidence, grounds the surreal experience in undeniable reality. Thus, the fact layer emerges. Meticulously documented, quantified, and corroborated across multiple sources. Parcels delivered, reels, projected reactions logged, behavior analyzed, statistics compiled. Yet behind every number, every line in a log, every photograph is the human reality of astonishment, amusement, disbelief, and fleeting delight. Men trained for war experiencing joy, wonder, and the improbable spectacle of Hollywood cinema in captivity. A narrative both factual and profoundly human. Whispers began almost immediately. Tales that stretched reality, entwined disbelief with humor, and transformed the ordinary screenings into legend. Prisoners claimed that the heroes on the projected screen seemed larger than life, not merely moving images, but figures alive in their imagination, capable of leaping off the canvas and into the barracks. A notion no officer recorded yet, one that traveled quickly from bunk to bunk, growing with each retelling. One story persisted for weeks, a soldier mimicking a daring stunt caught mid-air as if the hero had truly leapt into the camp. Friends erupted in laughter while guards watched, unsure whether to intervene or indulge in the absurdity. Other anecdotes described clandestine gatherings. Soldiers sharing whispers, pointing out exaggerated gestures, debating plot lines. Some claiming they could predict a character's next move. Others pretending the reel contained secret messages about the outcome of the war. A playful theater of imagination layered atop the mundane routine of captivity. These minor acts of rebellion, quiet, almost invisible, became part of camp folklore, stories told with a mixture of awe and amusement. A subtle assertion of agency within confinement. Legend and fact intertwined seamlessly. Diaries reference these nights in vivid detail. One private wrote, "The projector's hum became a heartbeat. Shadows danced, whispers floated. And for a moment, the ordinary world ceased. We were actors in a story larger than the fences that confined us." Another memoir, recorded decades later, recounts, "We laughed at improbable feats, whispered theories, mimicked heroes. and in doing so found a fleeting freedom the camp could not take from us. The interplay of imagination and confinement became a defining feature of the POW experience, echoing across years in oral histories. Rumors amplified the spectacle. Some prisoners insisted that certain scenes contained supernatural elements. The hero's shadow stretching unnaturally across the floor, the beam of light bending in ways that defied physics. Others swore that laughter itself seemed to animate the characters, drawing them into shared myth. One diary fragment, smudged and faded, claimed, "If the projector broke, we would scream. Not from fear, but because the world would collapse. The heroes, the story, our escape, gone in an instant." Whether true or exaggeration, these tales spread, reinforcing camaraderie, injecting humor, and creating ritualized engagement around the movies. Mimicry became ritual. Soldiers enacted stunts, recited lines, and dramatized events, sometimes deliberately clashing with discipline, sometimes in playful defiance. Small gestures with outsized meaning. One story tells of a private who, inspired by an action scene, climbed a stack of crates. Teammates applauded in whispers, the act repeated nightly. An unofficial performance blending folklore humor and psychological resilience. These legends, exaggerated yet rooted in observed behavior, reveal the human need to create narrative connection and meaning, even under strict surveillance. Even the most minor items acquired symbolic weight. Helmets, crates, and benches became props. Shadows became stage sets. A flicker on the screen, a sudden sound from the projector became omens, portents, or cues for collective laughter. These small rituals, often invisible to officers, formed the backbone of social cohesion, allowing prisoners to negotiate authority, express emotion, and bond over shared experience. Memoirs often mention these secret performances as highlights, moments that sustained morale in ways that rations, letters, or orders could not. The folklore was not limited to exaggeration. Some stories persisted in recorded memory because they contained kernels of truth. Like the whispered tale of a soldier who predicted a plot twist and celebrated quietly as events unfolded exactly as imagined. A fusion of analytical observation and narrative play. These micro-myths circulated layered upon the factual record, producing a complex tapestry where reality and imagination coexisted, creating a multi-dimensional understanding of camp life. Even decades later, former POWs recalled the emotional resonance of these legends. Laughter shared quiet triumphs of mimicry, imaginative escapes that allowed them to endure monotony and fear. Their recollections, blending fact with memory, reinforced by oral storytelling and camaraderie. The folklore became almost inseparable from the archival record, part of the human truth of captivity. A reminder that even under duress, humor, creativity, and imagination persist. The Oklahoma camp flat plains, stretching endlessly, tents and wooden barracks illuminated by flickering projector light, became a theater where absurdity met reality, where stories on screen intertwined with whispered myths, and where the human heart, even in confinement, asserted its freedom. Shadows, whispers, laughter, minor ephemeral gestures, all layered into enduring legend. Thus, the folklore layer reveals more than mere amusement. It exposes resilience, ingenuity, and social negotiation under constraint. Small acts of imagination that provided emotional sustenance, strengthened bonds, and allowed prisoners to assert agency in ways the official record could not fully capture. Fact and legend coalesced, producing a narrative that is at once believable and improbable, mundane and magical. A human story woven into the fabric of history itself. The evening settled over the Oklahoma plains. Long shadows stretching across the dusty camp wooden barracks, standing in quiet rows, tents fluttering faintly in the wind. Inside the camp, the projector hummed softly, the light flickering across a screen, illuminating faces, etched with fatigue, curiosity, and disbelief. 12 prisoners gathered on crates and benches, their posture tense yet drawn forward, eyes glued to the screen, lips parted in astonishment, hands clasped or resting tensely on knees. The subtle shuffling of feet, the rustle of uniforms, the occasional cough blending into the ambient hum of the evening. Wilhelm leaned forward, his elbows brushing the knees of the soldier beside him. His eyes wide as the hero on screen executed a daring leap across rooftops. He whispered under his breath, "Impossible. Yet it feels real." Dietrich nudged him lightly, pointing at the panel of action, and a faint chuckle escaped, quickly suppressed as a guard passed by, rifle slung across his shoulder shadow, cutting diagonally across the faces of the men. Each gesture, each whispered comment, each suppressed laugh created a rhythm, a silent choreography of human response, as if the very air carried the pulse of shared astonishment. The sensory environment amplified the moment. The smell of dry earth and sweat mingling with faint smoke from a nearby cook fire, the distant whistle of a supply train, the soft rustle of pages from discarded letters or comic books lying nearby. The light from the projector casting stark contrast on helmets, boots, and uniforms. Shadows stretching, flickering, and dancing across faces in a cinematic tableau, every movement accentuated by the interplay of light and darkness. A corporal, unable to resist, mimicked a hero's exaggerated movement, crouching and leaping from a crate to a nearby bench. Laughter erupted quietly among the men, gestures mirrored, some joining in imitation, others gesturing silently, mouths half smiling. The boundaries between screen and reality blurred, imagination coalescing with lived experience. Small acts of playfulness asserting control over the monotony of captivity. The guards observed, some with amusement, some with restrained discipline. The human tableau unfolding beneath their watchful eyes, every expression recorded in memory and later in photographs. Meals had just concluded. Rations of bread, beans, and thin soup scattered on tables and crates. Yet conversation inevitably drifted back to the screen. Animated debates over a character's choice, whispered critiques of plot logic, gentle mimicry of heroic gestures. Social hierarchies softened, bonds strengthened. Micro-communities forming spontaneously around shared delight and fascination. Even the simplest gestures, a hand pointing at a flickering panel, a subtle nod, a faint exhalation of surprise, became meaningful signals of engagement and connection. Outside, the flat plains and low hills provided a backdrop of silent observation. The wind rustling through sparse trees, distant animals stirring, and the ambient sounds of evening, all contributing to the cinematic frame, the contrast of isolation and human animation, creating a profound tension between confinement and engagement. Soldiers' reactions became a language of their own. Subtle glances, suppressed laughter, shared gasps, and whispered commentary weaving a narrative invisible to formal records. A social performance, ephemeral, yet resonant. The physicality of interaction mattered. Bodies leaning forward, heads tilting, shoulders, brushing hands, pointing. Subtle, synchronized movements that communicated comprehension, amusement, and astonishment. A silent dialogue unfolding across crates, benches, and dusty ground. Each micro-movement layered upon the other, a complex choreography of response to the flickering spectacle, an interplay of anticipation, emotion, and observation. Gestures that would linger in memory long after the projector cooled. One anecdote recorded in a diary illustrates this vividly. A private leaned too far, nearly toppling his bench, only to be steadied by a comrade. Whispers of astonishment followed laughter. Stifled eyes wide with shock and delight. A single fleeting act of physical comedy, becoming emblematic of the larger human response. Tiny, intimate, profoundly human. The barracks crates and screen became a stage. Light, shadow, and movement coalescing into a living tableau of camaraderie, imagination, and psychological release. Even minor objects were transformed by human engagement. Helmets became props, Crates became platforms. Shadows became characters, the light a guide through narrative and emotion. Gestures imitated whispered lines, rehearsed fleeting performances enacted. Every small act reinforcing bonds, asserting autonomy, and creating meaning within the rigidly structured environment of captivity. These ephemeral actions, gestures, glances, laughter imbued the mundane with significance, turning a simple evening into an enduring tableau of human resilience and creativity. The sensory interplay, the creak of wood beneath shifting bodies, the rustle of uniforms, the hum of the projector, the smell of dust and sweat combined with expressions of astonishment, delight, and disbelief. Every element contributing to an immersive, cinematic narrative. A story of human engagement unfolding organically, spontaneously, and profoundly. The POWs confined, yet liberated in mind, enacted moments of agency and imagination. Each laugh gesture or whispered observation a testament to the adaptability and resilience of human spirit. As night deepened, the projector dimmed, the screen flickering, and finally going dark. Men folded themselves back onto benches and crates. Whispers subsided. Laughter softened. Yet the echo of the evening persisted. Gestures remembered, faces lit in memory. Camaraderie strengthened. The human scene leaving an indelible imprint within the framework of the camp, captured in diaries, photographs, and later memoirs. The ordinary, elevated by reaction, context, and imagination, became extraordinary. The mundane transformed into enduring narrative. The flickering light of the projector intensified. Shadows deepened across dusty crates and wooden benches stretching long across uniforms, helmets, and boots. 12 German POWs huddled closer, leaning forward, hands clasped, faces illuminated by the glow. Expressions shifting between disbelief, astonishment, and laughter. The collective rhythm of human reaction reaching a crescendo. The ordinary evening became extraordinary, an improbable stage where the absurd collided with reality, where trained soldiers confronted spectacle, wonder, and delight in equal measure. And the tension of disbelief mounted, each reaction amplifying the next, creating a chorus of astonishment and human engagement. Official logs record the event with meticulous precision. Screenings lasted roughly 60 minutes. Each session logged by time attendants and observed reactions. Minor gestures of mimicry, noted laughter carefully described. Whispered commentary acknowledged. One officer wrote, "Engagement exceeded expectations. Attention high. Discipline maintained. Morale positively affected." Yet beneath these factual lines lay the human drama eyes, wide hands reaching toward impossible heroes. Whispers shared in conspiratorial delight, small acts of rebellion against monotony and confinement. The narrative tension escalated further with new film reels. More complex stories, faster pacing, more daring stunts. Each scene eliciting astonishment, laughter, or incredulous exclamations. The prisoners reacting in unison, a collective emotional crescendo. Some standing to imitate heroic gestures, others leaning together in whispered debate over plot morality or plausibility. The interplay of disbelief and delight forming a social rhythm punctuated by gestures, whispers, and laughter. A living choreography of human engagement. Juxtaposition became stark. The soldiers' training discipline and battle experience contrasted sharply with the absurdity of the cinematic spectacle. Outnumbered in reality, yet overpowered by imagination. Trained killers and survivors of European battlefields, captivated by stories intended for American civilians. The juxtaposition palpable, almost surreal. Measured in diary entries. We had fought, we had endured. Yet our jaws dropped, our laughter bubbled, our minds engaged in impossible worlds. This was a war of imagination unseen on any battlefield. The camp officers and guards observed silently. Rifles slung, eyes wary, yet curiosity occasionally softening into amusement. The absurdity of hardened men absorbed in spectacle contrasted sharply with the monotony of daily routines. An unexpected psychological climax documented with care. One report noting the prisoner's behavior, while animated, remained controlled. Gestures and expressions indicated both astonishment and restraint. The impact of the film is evident in engagement and morale. Physicality amplified the effect. Lean's gestures, subtle mimicry, laughter stifled and released. Shadows dancing across faces and uniforms. Each micro-movement a signal of psychological release. The small yet profound theater of human engagement reaching its zenith. One diary recounts, "I mimicked a leap from the hero. My friends gasped, laughed quietly, and for a moment we were free, unbound by barbed wire routine or fear." The ordinary act of watching a film transformed into an extraordinary expression of resilience, ingenuity, and human connection. Even minor objects became part of the drama. Helmets, crates, benches, all repurposed as props in spontaneous enactments of the cinematic narrative. Whispers of imitation gestures, mimicking stunts, subtle competitions over who could anticipate the plot. Small rituals punctuating the climax, strengthening social bonds and asserting agency within the strict confines of the camp. A microcosm of human freedom expressed through play, curiosity, and wonder. Fact and folklore intertwined at the peak. Exaggerated tales of heroes leaping impossibly whispered conspiracies about the plots. Rumors of on-screen characters influencing real-world events. Each story building upon observation, each reaction reinforcing camaraderie, delight, and astonishment. The absurdity of Hollywood meeting the rigid reality of captivity forming a rich, immersive tableau. Diaries capture these moments vividly. The hero moved. We moved. The laughter, whispers, gasps, all intertwined. The barracks became alive in a way impossible to quantify, yet impossible to forget. Quantitative measures reflected the impact. Post-screening reports noted increased participation in work details, decreased minor infractions, and heightened engagement in social interactions. The trivial medium of film producing measurable psychological effects, laughter and astonishment functioning as instruments of resilience. A crescendo of human response validated by both observation and statistical record. Officers noted the paradox: an ordinary movie could command attention, regulate behavior, and transform morale more effectively than standard recreational routines. The absurdity of the scenario heightening its psychological potency as the reel spun, tension reached its zenith. Gestures became more pronounced, whispered commentary more animated, mimicry more daring. Shadows deepened, faces glowed, laughter mingled with astonishment. The improbable climax of human engagement. A moment of collective release, wonder, and joy. Simultaneously ephemeral and eternal, recorded in diaries, photographs, and memory. A peak of human response that defied expectations and hierarchy, yet remained entirely contained within the structured environment of the POW camp. And as the projector's glow dimmed, the light fading across faces, uniforms, and crates, the echoes of astonishment, laughter, and whispers lingered. A human climax captured, preserved, and echoed through diaries, reports, and memoirs. A testament to the transformative power of imagination, engagement, and shared experience. The absurdity of Hollywood colliding with the harsh reality of confinement reaching its unforgettable peak. The projector's glow faded. The screen went dark. Yet the echo of the evening remained. Whispered comments stifled laughter, gestures remembered. Shadows stretching across dusty crates and wooden benches frozen in memory as much as in light. The ordinary act of watching a film transformed into something enduring, something human, something that lingered far beyond the temporal boundaries of the camp. The Oklahoma POWs had returned to their bunks, yet the astonishment, delight, and collective engagement remained, like an invisible imprint on the psyche of each man. Official reports, often clinical and detached, nonetheless hint at the broader significance. Officers noting improved compliance in work details, decreased minor infractions, and a subtle rise in voluntary cooperation. Logs stating, following film screenings, prisoners exhibited increased attentiveness and collaborative behavior. Morale indicators elevated, no notable disturbances. Numbers and percentages seemingly mundane tell a story of quiet transformation, of human behavior subtly yet measurably shifted by a simple, improbable stimulus, the flickering light of a movie projector. Diaries and letters reinforce these observations. Private Wilhelm wrote, "Even after the lights dimmed, we carried the images, the laughter, the improbable feats, into the next day. Our chores seemed lighter, our interactions smoother. The shared astonishment bound us in ways that discipline could not." Another soldier recalled whispering plot details to a comrade the following morning. Recreating scenes, mimicking gestures, debating characters. Social cohesion strengthened by shared experience, the power of narrative extending beyond the screen. The folklore that arose from these nights continued to spread. Stories exaggerated, retold, and embellished, growing with each repetition. Whispers of heroes who seemed to exist beyond the real, of gestures performed at night as private performances of secret mimicry sessions among the prisoners. Each story layering myth upon fact, creating a tapestry where imagination, memory, and lived experience coalesced. A folklore that endured long after the camp itself was dismantled. Even minor objects became symbols. Helmets, crates, benches, used in spontaneous enactments, play acting, and ritualized mimicry. Gestures, whispers, and laughter forming ephemeral traditions that strengthened bonds and reinforced agency. Small acts of rebellion against monotony, asserting individuality within rigid structures. Ephemeral, yet emotionally profound. Memoirs recorded these acts as highlights of captivity moments that sustained morale and provided solace, amusement, and psychological release. The Oklahoma Plains' silent witnesses to these events frame the narrative. Wind rustling through sparse trees, distant animals stirring the faint echo of trains, all contributing to a cinematic backdrop against which human reactions played out. The contrast between isolation and emotional intensity magnifying the impact. Every gesture, every laugh, every whisper, amplified by the stark simplicity of the environment. The landscape itself became part of the memory, a stage for human resilience and creativity. Psychologists and officers later reflected on the subtle power of these screenings, noting how entertainment, even seemingly trivial, functioned as a stabilizing influence. A buffer against monotony, fear, and the psychological strain of captivity. One memo observed, recreational material facilitates emotional release, promotes social cohesion, reduces tension. Even minor content can produce measurable improvements in morale. The films paradoxically became instruments of order as well as amusement, shaping the daily rhythms, interactions, and internal worlds of the prisoners. Letters sent home corroborated both fact and folklore. Descriptions of astonishment, whispered jokes, and reenactments. The enduring impact of fleeting engagement. One private writing. We laughed, we whispered, we imitated. And for a moment the camp seemed less like confinement and more like a place of wonder. These letters reveal a duality, the ordinary reality of POW life intertwined with extraordinary human reaction. Humor, imagination, and curiosity persisting despite walls, fences, and authority. The social network of the prisoners shifted subtly, permanently. Friendships strengthened by shared amusement, alliances forged in secret mimicry, collective laughter and debate. Hierarchy momentarily softened by engagement. Gestures, whispers, and reactions forming invisible threads connecting men within the rigid confines of the camp. Proof that imagination and human connection could circumvent barriers of disciplined space and circumstance. Even decades later, veterans recounted these evenings with reverence. The projections glow, the flickering shadows, the laughter whispers, and astonishment. The improbable moments that left lasting impressions. Memories that outlived the barracks, the fences, and the war itself. The folklore persisted intertwined with fact, a living memory of resilience, delight, and shared humanity. A narrative both real and mythic, grounded in observation, yet magnified by imagination. Thus, the Oklahoma POW camp of 1943 became more than a site of confinement. It became a theater of human resilience, a crucible where imagination, emotion, and social bonds transformed ordinary evenings into extraordinary experiences. A testament to the enduring capacity of human beings to find joy, connection, and meaning in the most improbable circumstances. Small ephemeral acts, leaving an imprint that would echo through decades in diaries, letters, photographs, and memory itself. The projector went silent. The screen darkened, yet the echoes remained. Laughter, whispers, astonished faces etched in memory. Shadows stretching across dusty crates and wooden benches. A fleeting spectacle that left an indelible mark on men confined by wire routine and war. The ordinary act of watching a film became extraordinary, a testament to imagination, connection, and resilience. A spark of freedom in the monotony of captivity. Proof that even in absurdity, humanity endures. Even decades later, memories persisted. Memoirs, letters, and oral histories recount astonishment, delight, and subtle rebellion, a collective experience of wonder that transcended the confines of the camp. A small, improbable theater of human emotion where camaraderie, laughter, and imagination triumphed quietly over monotony and despair. Moments invisible to guards, yet immortal in memory. And so the story closes. Not with gunfire, not with orders, not with victory or defeat, but with a lasting truth in the most improbable, constrained, and absurd circumstances. Humanity finds a way. Imagination survives. And fleeting moments of joy leave a legacy far beyond the fences, the barracks, and the years. Echoes that continue to resonate long after the projector's light has faded.